On today's show, we wrap up position preview week by taking a look at the centers for your Houston Rockets coming into this next season. So, of course, Alperen Sengun.
Hey, Houston fans. I am so happy.
Jock Landale, Jeff Green, and Boban Marjanovic. The expectations, roles, bold predictions, and so much more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short row. Oh, my, that's the no-look.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari, Eason.
Here comes Tari. Oh!
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making LOR part of your day every single day. We're wrapping up our position preview week here on today's show. Couple days behind schedule, unfortunately, but couldn't leave the centers hanging. We had to talk about them. Alperen Sengun, Jock Landale, Jeff Green, and of course, Boban Marjanovic. Now, this episode, similar to the Jalen Green episode, or the shooting guard episode, is going to be primarily focused on Alperen Sengun because he is going to be such a big, integral part of what the Rockets want to be able to accomplish this season. However, I do still want to, show some love and highlight some of the things that Jock Landale, Jeff Green, and Boban do potentially bring to the table for this team. So a little bit further down the line, but we're going to start this discussion primarily focused on Alperen Sengun because he's been, I don't want to say a polarizing force amongst Rockets fans for the past 2 years of his NBA career, but it's been a bit of an anomaly, I will say. Just the way that some fans really seem to understand and see the potential vision with him, or I guess maybe more so the disconnect between Rockets fans and seemingly the rest of the NBA and how the Rockets kind of internally have viewed Alperen Sengun, right? Where Rockets fans are head over heels in love with Alp. Other NBA fan bases love Alp. Other NBA players love Alp. We've seen time and time again. We had Kevin Durant talking about how Alp is nice. We've seen other NBA superstar level players talking about how Alperen Sengun is good. We've had Jokic talk about him. We've had Giannis talk about him. We've had LeBron talk about it. We've had every single, it feels like every star player in the NBA has hyped up Alperen Sengun at one point. And yet, the Rockets, through the first 2 years of Alp's career, were very much still dedicated to the Kevin Porter Jr. experiment, and they never really leaned into Alperen Sengun's abilities, especially as a potential offensive fulcrum, offensive hub, where's my shirt? A shin hub, if you will. And that, to me, is, I think, one of the biggest mistakes of the last 2 years of Houston Rockets basketball and kind of this rebuilding era, rebuilding process, is we still really kind of don't know what Jalen Green can be, and we kind of don't know what Alperen Sengun can really be because they weren't ever really fully unleashed through these last 2 years, right? First year, cool, KPJ experiment, awesome. Try it, see how it goes. They didn't do that, and I don't want to spend too much time harping on that because been there, done that, it's old news. But when we do take a look back at his first 2 years in the NBA, I think that the main takeaway should be that he had a lot of success pretty much in spite of a coaching staff that didn't empower him and didn't really believe in him a ton. And to an extent, an organization that didn't really appear to believe in him. Now, they say the right things. They do all the right things when they get asked about Alp. We love Alp. He's great, all this. But actions speak louder than the words, right? And so they were willing to bench Alperen Sengun for Bruno Fernando, right? Because Bruno Fernando benefited Kevin Porter Jr. And that was a thing that happened. And then Bruno got hurt, and so Alp kind of lucked out and fell back into the starting lineup. Had Bruno not gotten hurt, Alp might have been riding the bench for the first quarter of that season or half a season, potentially. Who knows, right? But thankfully, we didn't have to deal with that. And then later in the season, after trying to make Alperen Sengun a rim runner all season long, Kevin Porter Jr. gets hurt, and then suddenly the touches go up for Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. And those two guys look really great in that stretch where Sengun's getting all this extra burn. He had that massive game against the Lakers, which was a ton of fun to watch. And we kind of saw a very brief sample size of like, oh, this is what it would look like if you actually played through Alperen Sengun. And there wasn't really like design sets or all sorts of amazing stuff added to it. It was just, let's just give him the rock a bit more, right? And he made things happen with it. That's the thing that he does, is you put the ball in Alperen Sengun's hands. He makes pretty solid decisions with it. He gets his teammates open high-quality looks because he's the one player on this Rockets roster that routinely commands a double team. He commands a double team, he collapses the defense, and he's a pretty darn good passer. He's pretty solid at finding the open man. So it's either you try to guard him in single coverage and he's a foul magnet, right? So he'll draw fouls at an insane rate, or you force the double team and then you get a wide open look for somebody else on the roster. The problem is it really never felt like the Rockets learned how to play with him, right? Where there was always, Alp would get the ball, down low block, whatever. And there was always a lot of standing around, very little off-ball movement. Guys weren't sure how or when to cut. And it was just frustrating kind of seeing all that talent go to waste. Now, I'm not going to only focus on the good stuff that we've seen out of Alperen Sengun through 2 years, because we did see some struggles, right? Defensively. He has to get better defensively. And I do think that his defense was kind of made the scapegoat, I think, for last year's Rockets team. Talking to, staff members, talking to other people who cover the team, fans, it kind of felt like Alp's defense was the scapegoat of, oh, well, Alp's not great defensively, this, that, and the other thing. Well, the whole team was pretty bad defensively last season. And of course, that's going to make things look worse when your backline defender is also not a great defender, unfortunately. But I do think there's a world where if you utilize Alp in slightly different ways, you can at least get to a point where he is a passable defender, rather than exclusively playing him in deep drop coverage, which is exactly what Stephen Silas and the former coaching regime elected to do. So defense has to get better for Alp, and that was definitely an issue, not just for him, but for the entirety of this Rockets team last season. But, pardon me, there's a world where I think that with Ime Udoka, with the pieces that are now around Alperen Sengun, this team can really take a step forward. And I think that Alp has the potential to take a step forward defensively as well. So coming up, I do want to get into some of the expectations for what his role will look like this upcoming season, how Ime Udoka plans to utilize him both offensively and defensively. Also want to talk a little bit about what Jock Landale, Jeff Green, and Boban Marjanovic bring to the table with the center position, as well as getting to our stat line predictions and our bold predictions for the centers on this Rockets roster. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Look, I use DoorDash all the time, probably more than I should, honestly, but it's such an amazing app, right? Maybe you just wake up one day, you're not feeling well, or you just don't feel like putting on pants or walking out of the apartment or a house or whatever, and you just open the app, find your favorite restaurant, order your food, shows up right to your doorstep, right? It's amazing. It's so convenient. Now you can get your groceries delivered with DoorDash too, right? The same company that you've been trusting to deliver your favorite food and your favorite restaurants right to your doorstep, you can do it with groceries now. You'll get exactly what you ordered. They have thousands of grocery stores to choose from. You'll find the best in your neighborhood and get exactly what you want. You've got to try it, got to check it out. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order, up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKEDONNBA at checkout. Limited time offer, terms do apply. That's a 50% value off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONNBA. So don't forget, that's code LOCKEDONNBA for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, looking at kind of expectations for Alperen Sengun this upcoming season, I think that offensively, there's a world where I'm incredibly excited about what Ime Udoka can accomplish with Alperen Sengun as, a more of an offensive hub, a fulcrum, running offense through him, because we saw him do that utilizing Al Horford as a passing big at times with the Boston Celtics. And Sengun is, I think, far and above a better playmaker than Al Horford. So, and arguably just an overall better scoring threat, post presence, whatever you want to call it. Now, Al Horford's a significantly better defender at this stage in their respective careers. That's kind of the trade-off between the two. But what Alp brings to the table offensively is so unique. And for a coach like Ime Udoka, who preaches sharing the basketball and unselfish play, which I will highlight at times last season, just like everybody else on the roster, Sengun could be a little selfish with the ball, right? There were times when he would get the rebound and he put the ball on the floor and try to drive like coast to coast because he wanted to, make a fancy play or get the coast to coast big man transition finish, which is always a highlight reel waiting to happen, all that. I'd love to see Sengun get the rebound and look for outlet passes more, right? Get the rebound, immediately look up and survey the floor. You're going to have so many athletes playing on the floor with him. Jalen, Amen, even Dillon, running out in transition, potentially Cam Whitmore, Jae'Sean Tate, who likes to get out and run. Like all these guys, just Tari, who's a freight train, just look up, find somebody in transition, and just quarterback pass the ball down the floor to really ignite the break. And then there's plenty of times too in the half court where, sometimes the double team does come over and Alp realizes a little bit too late or gets an offensive rebound, and everybody's kind of guilty of that at times. But it's just worth highlighting, right? That, hopefully these are some of the, the kinks in his game that Ime will be able to iron out a little bit. But offensively, I think the sky's the limit. And when you have a dynamic duo like Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, who we've seen flashes of their two-man game potential with one another these last 2 years, we saw quite a bit more of it last season. I fully expect that two-man game, Jalen and Alp, and the pick and roll between those two guys to be the bread and butter for the Houston Rockets offense. Their offense is going to consist of a handful of major plays, and the initiators for those plays are going to be Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun pick and roll, Fred VanVleet, Alperen Sengun pick and roll, and then Alperen Sengun either at the elbow or at the top of the key or on the low block initiating offense. Those are going to be kind of the three main bread and butter offensive sets, plays, whatever you want to call it, for this Rockets team. And Alp is featured in all three of them, right? The question is, in the ones where he's as the pick and roll threat, right, for Jalen and for Fred, first off, I have the utmost confidence in Fred's ability to find Alp on the roll. Jalen showed an increased chemistry with Alperen Sengun in the pick and roll last season to where he was able to find Alp with these little shovel passes, bounce passes, sometimes over the top, whatever. They started developing a really great chemistry. Having two guards that can actually find Alp in the pick and roll when Kevin Porter Jr. really didn't develop that chemistry with Alp until like March of last season is going to do wonders for him, because he can be effective in the pick and roll, but I also want to see them not exclusively use him as a roll threat, right? Let him roll, let him pop a little bit, let him take some threes, let him go on the short roll, right? Let him slip a screen and then collapse the paint from the middle, or collapse the defense from the middle of the floor, grab the ball in the paint right around free throw line extended, and make some things happen from there. The possibilities are truly endless with what you can achieve when you have that dynamic of a big man on your team. So offensively, I think this Rockets team has a lot that they can do. Defensively are going to be the big question marks, right? For Alp, it's going to be how much has he grown as an individual defender? And the second part is going to be what types of defensive schemes does Ime Udoka implement to try and help Alperen Sengun defensively specifically, right? Do we see some hedging? Do we see Alp switch, right? Does Ime give Alp the confidence and say, you know what? I'm comfortable with you switching on to smaller guards. This is how we're going to play it. You're going to have help over here and help over here. You're going to be on a bit of an island. Play it right. Let's see what happens, right? Because the previous regime was never comfortable experimenting with any of that, right? We saw very infrequently sometimes where Alp did get switched onto smaller players, and he kind of held his own, right? Think about the Nets game near the end of the season where he got switched on to Mikal Bridges, who's not a smaller player, but he's a wing, right? Like 4 or 5 times in one game, and Alp held his own against Mikal every single possession that he got switched onto him. So I think because of Ime and his creativity defensively and his aptitude for that side of the basketball especially, I have really high hopes that they're going to find a way to get the most out of Alp on an individual basis defensively, but then also finding the right schemes to help him, right? To help mask some of those areas where maybe he can't, improve, where he's already at his best, right? He's at his 99th percentile of what he can do on the floor defensively. So then you have to add in, all right, we're going to put a little extra help at this spot on the floor, right? Like Jabari's going to cheat over. If you're guarding a wing on the corner on a switch, Jabari's going to cheat over and make sure that you've got the help. So you angle your body this way, funnel the offensive player down, whatever, that kind of stuff. And that, I'll leave the X's and O's up to Ime to figure out, but I have the utmost confidence that they're going to be able to figure something out in that regard. Thinking about expectations for Alp this season, JJ Redick recently on his podcast, Old Man in the Three, talked about the fact that Alp, he said, is a guy that he thinks all of a sudden after year 3 will be a household name in the NBA, which is high praise from JJ Redick. So let's run that clip back right now.
I'm going to go with Alperen Sengun. Again, we know he's good. I'm talking about breakout. And I've seen people compare him to like a Jokic light a little bit.
Baby Jokic.
Yeah. 14 points a game last year, almost 15, 9 rebounds, almost 4 assists, 55% from the field. A few things here. Houston's going to be more competitive. They bring in Ime Udoka. They're going to have more structure in the same way that Jokic or Sabonis functions as a hub for the offense. Sengun is going to do that for the Houston Rockets. And then the additions and to some degree the subtraction. And that's the additions of Thompson and the additions of Van Fleet, guys who can really pass the ball, guys who can run an offense. Thompson, of course, there's a learning curve for every rookie. But with all of that, and to some degree, if I'm being honest, the loss of Kevin Porter Jr. likely for the season, I would assume, I think that's going to benefit Sengun. I really do. And I could see him having a Sabonis-type season. Do I think Houston's going to be a top 6 team in the West? No, I don't think that. But he's a guy that all of a sudden I think after year 3 will be a household name in the NBA.
Do you like the Jabari Smith fit? And then also, do you think, obviously we don't know anything and we don't know what Udoka's plan is, but if you were in the room with them, would you run your offense through him like they do with Jokic?
Yes, I would. Obviously you're going to run a fair amount of pick and rolls with Van Fleet. Thompson will get pick and rolls. Jalen Green, I think the DHO game with him on a side, 2-man action, that's great. And then, out of delay action, 5-out action, his passing ability, his instincts as a playmaker, I think are really valuable. And then you can always post him. So I would say if I'm Ime Udoka, I'm running the offense through him.
They're really interesting.
There's
a lot going on. Brooks is going to be really interesting. I didn't pick him, but Jabari, I think, is another one.
You asked about the fit. I'm sorry, I didn't answer that. And my quick response to that was based on Jabari Smith's play in Summer League. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Jabari Smith did not have a great rookie season. Highly inefficient on the offensive end. Had a 2 or 3 week stretch towards the end of the regular season where he looked really good. He was phenomenal in Summer League and shot the ball from the outside. And so I think that pairing works. I do.
Yep.
Shout out to JJ Redick for showing showering the young Houston Rockets with some love there. Mentioning a lot of the things that we already brought up, right? The 2-man game between Alp and Jalen, those DHO sets, the empty 2-man actions, which we saw a lot of last season, are seemingly really effective between that duo. And I didn't even mention Amin Thompson, so shout out to the JJ clip for saving my butt there. But having another guard in Amin Thompson, right? Somebody who can facilitate in the pick and roll, who can see over the top of defenses, so another guard who can help set up Alperen Sengun. And I'm right there with JJ, right? I fully agree that the Rockets should be running a majority of their offense through Sengun. It feels like he will be a huge part of the offense, if not directly, but just, as a side effect of being a part of those pick and rolls with Jalen, Fred, Amin, all of that. He's going to be involved in so much of the offensive action. I think he's, poised for a breakout season, right? Compared him to Sabonis, compared him to Jokic. this could be the year where we see Alperen Sengun really break out and become a common household name. So I like that take from JJ Redick. I'm fully on board with it. Coming up, want to share some thoughts on the other centers on the roster, Jock Landale, Jeff Green, Boban Marjanovic, what they're going to be able to contribute to this team, as well as our stat line predictions, bold predictions, all of it. It's coming up in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Do me a favor, let me know your thoughts on the Rockets centers going into this season. They got 4 of them on the roster. One of them is going to get quite a significant amount of playing time, and then kind of rotating probably between Jock Landale, Jeff Green on the back burner, and then Boban hanging around for the vibes. So we'll see how all that works out. But let me know your thoughts, your expectations for these guys in the YouTube comment section. Give me your bold predictions. Give me a bold prediction for Alperen Sengun. I will say, just kind of quickly going through these guys here with Jock Landale. First off, I love the addition of Jock. I think he's a fantastic hustle, hard-nosed big to bring to back up Alp. Somebody who's really going to push him in practice, and then also just situationally in the game. Right, the Rockets kind of have this new version of the Goon Squad with Amen Thompson, Jae'Sean Tate, Tari, Eason, and Jock Landale as the primary 4 off the bench for this team. And I love that bench unit. Now, that those 4 guys might not get a ton of run all together at the same time, but all those guys have that dog mentality. They hustle, they fight, they get after it. And so I think that's just kind of what you want, right, in a couple of those backup spots. So I fully expect Jock to have a really solid year with the Rockets. And I do think, again, his role is going to be kind of situational. Some nights it might be Landale. Some nights it might be Jeff Green. Hell, some nights it might be Boban, right, who gets some of the backup minutes. And some nights it might not be any of them if the Rockets elect to play small and they want to run Jabari Smith Jr. as the primary backup 5 just for matchup purposes. So there's a lot of lineup for versatility here, a lot of different ways that Ime can go with how he wants to slot certain guys in and out of the lineup. And I think that's going to be an expectation that he sets pretty early on, is that nobody is guaranteed minutes, and this team is competing, right? Ime is going to push all the right buttons and do all the right things that it takes to win basketball games. And that might mean there might be a night where Jalen's not closing the game, or where Sengun's not closing the game, or Jabari's not closing. If, matchup dependent, if there's a better matchup somewhere else on the floor, or if somebody else is having a better game, that player might get the run. It's going to be a meritocracy moving forward. Guys are going to have to play to earn their keep on this roster. Looking at Jeff, though, in his role, first off, Jeff Green, I think, was a sneaky great addition for this Rockets team, a huge veteran boost, somebody who played a pivotal role for the championship Nuggets last season. While I don't think he's going to be necessarily a staple part of the rotation, consistently. Again, I think it'll be matchup dependent. I think he'll probably rack up a fair share of DNPs this season. Having him around, having him as another stabilizing veteran locker room presence is going to do wonders for this young group. And bringing Boban back is solid too. Like, just for the vibes, I think Boban is one of the most genuine human beings you will ever meet. Having him around just elevates everybody. Because even when the going gets tough, when it's a long, grueling 82-game season, having somebody there like Boban in that locker room to help kind of ease the tension, calm some frustrations at times, it can be really beneficial. So I like that they brought Boban back. I do kind of, I kind of wish that they maybe would have used that roster spot on a different style of big, maybe like a rim runner over the top basket kind of big. I remember suggesting JaVale McGee potentially. But it's neither here nor there, because whoever they put in that spot was likely only going to get spot minutes anyway. So not the end of the world. But when we look at the stats for these guys, I want to circle back to Sengun here. Actually, you know what? I'll save Sengun for last. We'll do the Sengun one last. I'll go through these other guys really quick, because for Jock Landale, I think it's going to be pretty simple. I think it's a quick 8 points, 5 boards off the bench. His minutes totals, he's going to get anywhere from, could be as few as 10 minutes a night, in certain games, to as much as 20, 25 minutes a night, right? It just kind of all depends on matchups. And I think what we see, and this is kind of like a 2-parter bold prediction for Jock Landale. So kind of 2 mini predictions, if you will. One, I think Jock develops a consistent three-point shot this season. It's something that he's been working on. We know that he's been working on trying to, kind of convert himself into a stretch big. And given that the Rockets are an organization that still very much values analytics and three-point shooting above all else, it would not shock me to see, an emphasis being placed on that by Ben Sullivan working with Jock Landale. We've seen some pictures of him in the Rockets practice facility getting threes up. It would not shock me to see Jock Landale actually come out with a consistent three ball this season. So I'm going to predict 8 points, 5 boards, and 34% three-point shooting for Jock Landale. And my other bold prediction is I think there's a world where we might actually see some Jock Landale, Alperen Sengun minutes at the same time on the floor. Depending on the matchup, if they go up against like a Twin Towers lineup, like let's say the Cleveland Cavaliers, potentially, we might see some minutes where Jock and Sengun actually share the floor with one another. So that's a bit of a bold prediction. It kind of overlaps between the two guys, but I just wanted to get that one out there. Now, for Jeff Green, I kind of already talked about his veteran impact and the presence that he brings. I won't go with a stat line prediction for Uncle Jeff, but what I will say is I think he's going to be the most important veteran addition to this Rockets team. Now, I know that might be a bit of a reach because obviously they went out, they got Van Vliet, they went out and they got Dillon Brooks, and those guys are going to have more of an on-the-court impact for sure. But I think when you look at the longevity of Jeff Green's career, where he's been, the types of players that he's played with, the season that he's coming off of, the knowledge and wisdom that he'll be able to impart on some of these young players, he literally just won a championship with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, who you can very easily look at and see the similarities between those two guys and a Jalen Green and an Alperen Sengun, right? And the way that Murray and Jokic have their two-man game, and that is the entire basis of the Denver Nuggets offense. The same way that Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, their two-man game should be the basis for the Houston Rockets offense. I can see a world where Jeff is constantly pulling Jalen or Sengun aside and saying, hey, so look, try this, do this, try different things here. This is what I'm seeing. Just, again, that veteran voice, basically having like another coach on the bench, but also on the floor at times is going to be so invaluable for this Rockets team. So I think that's my bold prediction for Jeff. I do really love the pickup. I think having him, if you had just gotten Fred and Dillon, would have felt solid, but having that like kind of old man on the team in Jeff Green, who can still hoop, by the way. Jeff can still play. He's not just locker room Jeff Green now. I still fully expect him to get some minutes here and there situationally this season. I love the pickup for him. Already talked about Boban, kind of what he brings to the table. And let's face it, Boban's just going to be kind of the victory cigar, right? When it hits garbage time, whether the Rockets are winning or losing, those are the Boban minutes. And he's it used to be Bobby Brown was the human victory cigar. Now it's Boban Marjanovic is the human victory cigar, or the human defeat cigar, I guess. Hopefully less defeat this season than last year. But for Alperen Sengun, stat line prediction for Alp. I've mentioned this stat line before, and I feel honestly very confident in saying that I think Alp this season gets up to 20 points, 11 boards, 5 assists, and I think he's going to average a steal and a half and a block and a half per game. He was already just under 1 steal, 1 block per game last year, 0.9 in each category. I really do think he's going to average about a steal and a block and a half per game, along with the 20, 11, and 5. And I'm going to call it right now, 35% from the three-point line. He comes back with a heater. He shot 33% this past season on very low volume, unfortunately. So kind of looking at his stat lines, I know JJ mentioned it in the clip that we ran, but this past season, right, just under 15 points a contest, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, just under a steal and a block per game on his three-point volume. Just under a 3 a game, but 33% from 3, and then his 2-point percentage 57% from the floor there. Or I apologize, his field goal percentage 55%, and then 57% exclusively from 2-point land. I think those numbers are going to go up across the board. I think there's a world where if the Rockets really do lean into him and capitalize on the two-man game between him and Jalen, which is what I fully expect them to do, there's a world where Alp's averaging 20 and 11 and 5. Maybe even more than 5 assists. I might be shortchanging Alp on the assists with just 5. It could easily be like 20, 11, and 6, 20, 11, and 7. And because of that insane volume, because the counting stats are going to be there, and I think because the Rockets are going to have so many powerful narratives behind their team this season, my bold prediction, similar to JJ Redick, right? Talking about breakout candidates this season. I think LP wins Most Improved Player of the Year. I think the Rockets are going to make a very strong push for the play-in. LP is going to be at the forefront of that push. And if the counting stats are there, if he's breaking 20 points a night, 11 rebounds, and he's got the 5 assists, again, that is a Sabonis-esque stat line. And even if the Rockets aren't a top 6, top 4 seed like the Kings were this past season, that stat line alone should put LP, far and away the favorite to walk away with Most Improved Player of the Year, or at least put him in heavy contention for the award. But my prediction is LP wins Most Improved Player of the Year. And that would be a fantastic way to see him kind of bounce back from the first 2 years of his career, even though it's not a bounce back, but just, honestly kind of sticking it to the previous coaching staff, right? Like, hey, this is what you could have had these past 2 years, and this is what it finally looks like now that we got a chance to actually play some meaningful competitive basketball. And the last point that I do want to put in here before we wrap things up, I love JJ's point about playing competitive basketball, right? I don't think we can reiterate that point enough, is that having these young guys playing competitive games, meaningful basketball games where they know that they are striving for something and that it's not just, let's just make it through another 82-game slate. We know we're going to suck. We know we're going to be a bad team. Who wants to put forth that extra, right? Who wants to go 110%? Who wants to go the extra mile when you know that the season is already an L the moment, game 1 of 82 tips off, right? That's not fun. That's not fun for any of the young guys on the roster. And I do think that goes back to the whole argument of, tanking, and is it damaging to a player's future prospects, career, development, all that. I don't think it is, because you see guys who have gone through those situations, right? Embiid in Philly, Devin Booker in Phoenix. And, once those teams put winning, first, those players turned out just fine because the talent rose to the top. But I do think it's just been frustrating for these past couple of years for the young guys, because there's some bad habits were formulated, some tendencies were made. Effort at times was not great from Sengun or from Jalen, definitely from Kevin Porter Jr. at times. And that kind of just permeated itself throughout the roster, right? It's a brand new chapter. It's a clean slate. They're coming in with high expectations of ideally making it to at least the play-in tournament, potentially beyond, right? It should be an exciting, fun season, and of course, we're going to have you covered for all of that right here at Locked On Rockets. Don't miss our next episode, where we're going to tackle the biggest questions going into Houston Rockets Media Day and what to expect from Media Day. I'll kind of walk you through how Media Day functions, what's going on behind the scenes, all that good stuff. And of course, we'll have all the individual player interviews, all of it posted up on the YouTube channel throughout the day. Monday, Media Day is 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., Monday, October 2nd, and then we'll have training camp right after that. 4 days of training camp, which I will be there in person again for. So I'll have all the exclusive video footage, everything coming out of training camp, so it should be a ton of fun. So be on the lookout for all that content. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.